Our next item is a presentation by Streets, Urban Forestry, Engineering, and Parks on managing trees and urban green space. And we have representatives of a number of different agencies here. You can pick your side.
Yeah.
And we'll start with our Public Works Manager and
If you like.
Streets Superintendent, Charlie Romines.
Thank you, Mayor. Evening, everybody. Good to be here. It has been, I think, years since I presented anything in person in front of council, so bear with me if I flub it. My name's Charlie Romines. I am the Streets and Urban Forestry Superintendent. With me in order of appearance is Sarah Lerner. She's landscape architect with our engineering division. City Forester, Ian Brown, been with us just about a year, and Eric Knepp from the Parks Division. Public trees and green space within the city of Madison. I'm just going to cover a couple points here. Go ahead and advance. So many of you may not know that forever and a day, urban forestry was housed within the Parks Division, as was I for almost my first 7 years with the city of Madison. In January of 18, I moved over to become the street superintendent, and in January of 2020, forestry followed. Why? I've been asking myself that a lot the last couple weeks. Go ahead and forward the slide. Two main reasons. There were financial benefits for doing that, and there's a lot of operational benefits to do that to this, and I'll touch on those very, very quickly. So a lot of people don't know that for the way it had worked forever was that if a resident took care of a tree, brought it out to the curb, the Streets Division chipped and hauled that brush, but if an arborist, a city arborist did the same thing, we took our highly trained and skilled arborists and we put stump grubbers and brush trucks in their hands, and thought, well, it makes a lot more sense if the people we have that already do that work just do that work and keep our arborists arboring. So essentially what we've been able to do is do just that. Our arborists no longer drive brush trucks. They no longer chip the brush. That is done by the Streets Division staff throughout the year. And one of the biggest operational efficiencies that has brought to pass is we were on a cycle prune, like every tree, every right-of-way tree in the city was getting pruned once every 20 to 22 years. We're now down to about 10, 11 years. So that's just a small example of the power of having the Streets Division and Forestry together. And then we've brought on Public Works laborers. These are full-time year-round laborers. They do a lot of the same tasks that our seasonal laborers do, but these are full-time positions with a lot of great opportunities for people to grow. That's not the purpose of tonight. But what that has done is financially, we've taken $250,000 off the general fund, which I know is especially relevant these days, and put it onto the urban forestry special charge, very appropriately so, with a lot of wonderful benefits to the urban forest, which I touched on one, but for the sake of time, we'll leave that there for now. But it's been a big win. And our arborists, who are all wonderful, but you can't get them all to agree the sky is blue, will tell you that this has been a big win for our forestry section. Next slide, please. And then the second thing that I wanted to go on, talk about real briefly beyond just the annual kind of benefits from a financial standpoint is operationally. The storm that we had 2 weeks ago, if we hadn't made the change, the city would have managed it. Parks and Forestry and Parks would have managed, streets would have helped, it would be okay. But having forestry in the Streets Division means that we have been for almost 4 years now working together as a unit where we have brush truck drivers and chippers that already know the arborists, already know the choreography of a storm work zone. And what that has allowed us to do, I don't know if all of you know, we have less than 30 people in the city who run a chainsaw. Right now, that's about 23 arborists. We have 4 trainees who got here just in time for spring planting, and we have 2 people out in workman's comp. They're doing all the chainsawing from over 1,070 tree calls. we're 2 weeks in, and what some people, including MG, have said is, in some regards, the worst storm since 1976. We've had no worker injuries. The residents of the city haven't had significant injury. And I don't want to say the storm wasn't a big deal and we didn't have constituents that were upset, but by and large, I think from a public works standpoint, the fact it seems almost like a non-event is a credit to this change and people like Ian Brown, who's been with us a year as city forester. I want to say specifically Craig Klinke. He is a forestry operations supervisor. I don't think he went home for 36 hours, the first 36 hours. And Dean Call, very similar, the forestry foreperson. The heavy lifting they did in the first 36 hours and continuing since then has been really incredible. It's behind the scenes, and often those are the type of people who get forgotten. The fact that we work with them on a day-to-day basis, we've embedded streets division crews in with those arborists, we've kept the crews moving. We have saved probably 2,000 hours conservatively by hauling brush from our residents' right-of-ways into parks, thank you, Eric, and chipping it there and making it available for free for our residents to come get. That's a massive savings in time. That's probably we're getting close to probably 3,000 gallons less of diesel fuel burnt. Those are things that would have been extremely hard to do without the cooperation that we have and the advantage of having forestry with the streets division now, and then the interworking relationships we have within the public works division. So those are hard to quantify, but I think in events like this, you can see the benefit of having a strong forestry group within streets working collaboratively with the other public works agencies. And I'm gonna get off the soapbox because it's gonna be this is not meant to take that long, but I will point out we had over 270 calls. That is roads completely blocked, partially blocked, and trees on homes. And the last thing I'll say before I hand it over to Sarah is one of the other real big benefits, and one of the first things we did with this storm, besides hauling brush to parks and chipping it there, was we leveraged the streets division staff. And at 9 o'clock at night, on that Tuesday night, we were all in, and we were running the city streets, calling out down trees, down limbs, road blockages, houses, trees on houses. Forestry's never had that information so fast. They're typically running blind for the first 12 to 24 hours, getting calls constantly coming in. Now the calls still came in, but oftentimes they knew it already. Now, that's the first time we've done it. We will get better at it. It was good, it will be better. But again, those are just some of the benefits. I thought it was topical just to mention that a little bit. Oh, okay. All right. Anyhow, I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions about that now or later, I'm happy to talk about it. But you never want to see these types of events in a city, but from an operations standpoint, these are the kinds of things we get excited about when staff show up, do their job, and serve the residents well. So with that, I will turn it over to Sarah Lerner from engineering.
And we'll take questions for everybody at the end. Sarah?
Great, thank you. So as Charlie mentioned, my name is Sarah Lerner. I'm a landscape architect with the City of Madison Engineering Division. So if you want to go to the next slide. So I'm here to talk about stormwater utility land. That is also part of our larger public green space. It is for usually a specific purpose to manage stormwater services. These are usually related to development requirements to meet our ordinances. So a little bit different than some of our other public spaces. Starting in the 1990s, engineering division started requiring separate dedication to meet ordinance and stormwater requirements compared to parkland dedications. So prior to that, there was a little bit of a mixture of both areas. There was some dual dedication, but since the 1990s, now we have separate stormwater utility land and then separate parkland that is required to be dedicated by developers. I'm gonna go to the next. So here's a little bit of history on how we get our land. So we primarily get stormwater utility land through subdivision dedication for stormwater requirements or through land acquisition. This is an example of one of our more recent, within the past 10 years, dedication. So this is a parcel, the dotted black line, that is the entire parcel is a stormwater utility outlot. Within it, we have separate wet ponds, infiltration basins, greenways. All of this is in order to meet specific stormwater requirements. Some of our properties are maybe just one larger pond, like Cardinal Glen, adjacent to Cardinal Glen Park, that is just one wet pond. And then some of our properties are like this kind of little matrix of basins, greenways, and ponds in order to meet our stormwater ordinance requirements. So most of our land is for infiltration, sediment and pollution capture, flood control, or stormwater conveyance. So then the other way we typically acquire land is through acquisition, with one recent project that I'm going to talk about in the next few slides. If you want to go to the next one. All right, so this is a little bit of our composition of property. We have about 1,500 acres of land, and I would not take that verbatim because it is very complex based on historical dedications. Back when Madison was first developing, they didn't develop stormwater land versus park land, and so we have greenways and parks. We have vice versa. We have basically every type of configuration you can imagine. But we have 1,500 acres that are owned under the assessor's office, if you were to look that up, by stormwater utility. And these are primarily kind of these nature-based solutions that are infiltration basins, greenways, retention ponds, wet detention ponds, dry detention ponds, a few rain gardens, but most of our rain gardens are on other public property. And then we have greenways, which is a little bit less of our total acreage compared to ponds, and these range from stormwater conveyance, dry ditches like Robin Greenway, which I'll show you in a second, as well as intermittent streams like Door Creek, or maybe portions of Starkweather Creek or Pinedo Creek. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are still part of that larger public open space system. All of our lands are open to the public, and while our primary goal is stormwater management, we do provide also lots of other benefits similar to other open spaces. We promote pollinator habitat and biodiversity. All of our new ponds and bioretention and infiltration areas are required to be restored with native plants. We promote urban canopy efforts. Ian will talk about our efforts on joint collaboration with dealing with spongy moth. And a lot of our areas are also used for public green space and recreation. So this is a slide of Robin Greenway, a recent reconstruction in a greenway project. This was taken a few days ago. This is the first year after construction is complete. You can see that the access path along this greenway also serves as kind of a neighborhood recreational path. Next slide. So a lot of our property is adjacent to park property, and it's very often, there's no easy way for the public to understand when you're on stormwater versus park property, and that's a good thing because it kind of can enhance that experience. And Lower Badger Mill Creek Ponds is a great example of where both agencies got together and created this larger open space that combines stormwater services as well as public recreation and parks. This property was recently acquired. These ponds on the stormwater utility land were constructed last year. All that area in, is that teal? That was graded so last year, and then the ecological restoration, wetland restoration is happening this year with plants, native seed, trees being planted. The path, the recreational path through the properties of engineering and park properties is being constructed this year. So here's an example where we have a land acquisition. It was acquired for regional flood purposes, but also as part of park expansion, and we kind of combine these areas as part of the larger open space system. Next slide. And last but not least, I'm just going to do a plug. We are currently writing our stormwater vegetation management plan. We're nearing the end of the planning phase where we've already had our public meetings. So if you're interested in more, I posted the website on the screen. And now I'll turn it over to, I think Ian is next.
Hey, good evening. My name's Ian Brown. I'm the city forester. I've been here for a year and a hot minute. I literally started about this time last year. So just in time to join for kind of the storm of generations. But the bread and butter of what we do and nested within the streets division, the urban forestry team manages our terrace trees. So you can think of these primarily as the trees between the sidewalk and the curb. And we have about 100,000 of these. So these are the trees that most of our visitors, residents, constituents are interacting with on a daily basis. These are the ones that we're seeing the majority of our stormwater benefit from because they're overhanging impervious surface, shading the business areas so people loiter and spend money. And these are the areas that are our primary focus as the urban forestry team. So we do tree planting, maintenance, removals when necessary. We do not remove healthy trees, only when they're hazardous and need to come down for public safety. Unfortunately, we've been doing a lot of that with the storm. We do get involved in tree protection as well. So if you think about any time that there's a development, either a new development where they're converting agriculture to residential housing, or in a downtown space where there is potential tree impact, our team is involved in reviewing those plans and helping to spec those spaces and those sites to support canopy, both now and into the future. So we have a role both in planting and supporting young trees, helping grow them to maturity, as well as preserving, supporting, and being the voice for the mature trees, because it took decades for them to actually get to that space. So, and then the last piece really is emergency response. So I have a little bit about that, in the future. Next, please. So why do we go through this effort? I think most in the room, as well as most of the constituents here in this community, they really lean into and embrace the urban canopy benefits. And it goes much further than just, hey, trees are nice and they're beautiful. There's a lot of stormwater benefit. There's a lot of energy benefits associated with them. I mentioned it from a business perspective. You're going to have people that are going to loiter in commercial areas because there's tree canopy as opposed to, baking on the sidewalk. You're having property values that are increased anywhere from 5 to 15% with urban canopy that are in front of them. And so those are things that really start to impact the community. There's health benefits too. If you can see urban green space, if you can see and interact with those types of areas, people have better health outcomes, both in prevention as well as in recovery. And so the work that we do has a large impact that really flows through the life of everyone that either lives in, recreates in, or comes to visit the city here in Madison. Next, please. So how do we start? You get a big tree by planting a little tree and then cultivating it for decades. So you start with planting little trees. We do plant anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 trees a year. Since 2019, that was the last year that we were doing preemptive ash removals in the wake of managing our emerald ash borer epidemic. We have been planting about 1,000 trees more per year than we have been removing. And that's something that we would look to continue as well. Now, planting a tree this size is not the same as removing a tree of this size. And so that's where we really have to do our due diligence to really preserve and support the mature canopy that we have. Now, when we're planting trees, we are also working off of a planting selection list that we present to the Habitat Stewardship Subcommittee. We have 72 unique species, and so we are invested in not only supporting canopy as a whole, but trying to support a diverse canopy so that when we have another host-specific pest, we've had elms and Dutch elm disease, major impacts from that, replanted a lot of ash trees. Now we have emerald ash borer, all our ash trees are going down. So what can we do in the future so that if we have some other host-specific pest or fungus, disease, whatever, that we're gonna lose one tree on the block rather than whole trees on the block? So this is something that we're looking forward to and trying really to plan. Now that does look different. So if you have a whole block that's honey locust, if we have to remove a tree, I can pretty much guarantee you we're gonna plant something that's different than honey locust. So it is a different aesthetic. That's not bad, that's just different. And so it's an opportunity for us to educate. Diversity is good. The resilience of the community and the canopy are good when we have that integration weaving in and out of all of our neighborhoods. So we're doing that within our tree selection process as well. And then we will preferentially plant large canopy species. So, for instance, a Japanese tree lilac or a crabapple, They're beautiful, they have flowers, they're ornamental trees, but you can plant those things till you're blue in the face and it actually won't move the needle on community canopy. There is no crabapple that will ever grow over a building. We need to plant big trees if we're going to have urban canopy that grows over either sidewalks, streets, houses, any of those. And so if we're trying to move the needle towards a community canopy coverage goal, we need to plant big trees. Again, big trees, they start small and we wait, but we are really looking at trying to put a big tree in every place that we possibly can fit it. And then furthermore, we're working with the engineering team to spec and improve the soil specifications. So below grade, we're doing things that would allow those large canopy species to actually reach maturity. Because if you don't give them the necessary soil requirements that they need, it doesn't matter what you plant, they still won't grow. So we are trying to work across these divisional boundaries to really try and support the future canopy of Madison to the best that we can. Okay, next please. So once you plant them, what do? Well, you have to maintain them. And how do we do that? We have a computerized street tree inventory. Every green dot on the map is a tree site. So we actually just updated this this year, and we have a public-facing side to this that we'll be going live on in the near future, probably months, not years. But there will be an opportunity for residents to actually interact with what is the tree outside my house. And so this is a software that we are using right now to run our field operations. We table this for storm response because it's a little bit clunky. It's a lot of clicks to do for a single tree. But right now, as we're doing kind of the cleanup phase, we are absolutely going back to this. So a tree removal gets put in here, it creates a work record. Our field crews are using iPads in the field to manage their work electronically and track their work electronically. So this is a way that we can not only track what we're doing, but be more efficient and transparent with the work that we're actually doing throughout the community. Charlie mentioned our pruning cycle. So young trees, similar to the association I usually give is like kids or a puppy, you do have to invest a bit more with them when they're young. And so we actually do, we call it structural pruning, but young tree pruning, we do more frequently to try and set those trees up for success in the future. That's establishing their structural lateral branches, so we can actually help train the tree in the way that it's going to grow, clear the sidewalk, clear the street, so we don't have ongoing impacts with either buses, cars, pedestrians in their face. Those are all things that we have to be aware of, much more so than a tree that might be planted in someone's private property. Mature trees, on the other hand, once they're established and their canopy is above the area that we need to clear, they don't need as much attention. So we don't have to go back to those mature trees more than maybe once every 10 years. Reducing those pruning cycles is always ideal. 10 years is definitely not bad. So we're trying to strike a balance there of investing more time and energy on the little trees where it really, really matters. Maybe a little less energy on the mature trees where it doesn't matter as much, but still try and have an efficient, systematic pruning cycle. We do attempt to reach out to all of you as alders as well when we do what we call district pruning. We send you a map and say, hey, our crews are going to be in there. And so there is a greater impact to the neighborhood when we have all of our staff there, but they're there once every 10 years, maybe once every 5 years. So we'll try and be as quick and light of a footprint as possible, but there is potentially an impact for your residents when we are there. I mentioned the tree protection piece. So you can think of these as basically forestry eyes on engineering plans. So when we have plans that are drafted, we have forestry staff that are looking at how many trees are impacted. Are there ways that we can adjust the plans or make requests to the developer to move a driveway, move a sidewalk, move an access, move the building back, things like that, where we can actually advocate to either save the trees that are there, or if we can't, what can we do to improve the sites in the future so that we can either have a bigger, better planting space, maybe tearing out paved area where we can put in green space, porous space. We have suspended terrace solutions. That's a generic term for things like Silva cells or green blue cells. Those are trade names similar to Kleenex and facial tissue. But those are things that actually develop plantable space below grade that those trees can actually grow in. And so even in a heavily paved area like State Street, you can actually grow canopy trees to maturity. But you really do have to have those types of below ground infrastructure in place to be able to do that. Okay, next please. We have been doing a lot of storm response. As Charlie indicated, I think just so you have kind of a scale on this, in a typical storm, we might get 30 to 40 calls. A bigger storm, we might have 100 calls. A pretty bad storm, we might have 150 calls. We have nearly 1,100 calls that we've been following up on. The 270 calls that Charlie referenced, those are our highest priority emergency situations, like literally a tree laying on a house or blocking the road completely. We had staff in from Tuesday night continuously until Saturday morning. Clearly they do have to go home, but they were running 12-hour shifts and doing everything that they could. With that being said, we have a staff of essentially 30 chainsaw folks. So when we have a blizzard, you can potentially call more cavalry, more people that could potentially man plow trucks, staff plow trucks. The challenge that we have with arboriculture is storm response is literally the most dangerous thing that we do. There can be wires and trees, and there were wires and trees. You can have trees and branches that are under either compression or tension. You were not present when that got put in place, and so you don't know exactly how those things are gonna release. And so there's not really an opportunity to just say, throw more labor at it. You need to have the most trained staff helping with those situations. And so we worked through as fast as we could, but when there's a list of 270 really bad things, someone's gonna be number one and someone's gonna be 269. And we're gonna work as quick as we can, and that's just how it is. But we tried to be transparent with all of the residents to let them know, yes, you're on the list, we are coming. I can't give you a time frame, but know that we know about you and we are coming to try and help. What I have a picture of here is actually our most specialized piece of equipment. The staff call it the KGB. It's a knuckle boom crane that actually has a grapple head attachment. So if you've seen traditional feller buncher heads from a forestry perspective, where you're doing like tree removal in a rural setting, it actually has an arm, hydraulic arm that would grab the tree, and then it has a chainsaw underneath. So what you can see there is the yellow head has forks that can grab the tree and keep it attached, and then a cutter head underneath. And so what we can do in this type of situation, where you have a large tree that fails on a house, you can actually grab the tree, cut the branch, and lift it off the house without doing additional damage. And in this case, the resident had actually reached out and said, oh my gosh, I'm so impressed because we had new windows put in, the tree was right over my windows, and it didn't damage the windows. So this is probably our most expensive piece of equipment that we have, but its bread and butter is these types of storm situations. And so it can not only cut and lift, but it can also be used as a rigging point. It's a 10-ton crane. And so having this type of piece, or having this equipment available for our staff to use, was really essential. We have one. So again, this was going to the hairiest of the hairy, and really trying to do whatever we could to put this piece of equipment to the best use wherever we had it. Next, please. I'll try and wrap up quick here. So we also deal with pest management. I mentioned emerald ash borer. We're navigating a spongy moth spike. If you don't know what spongy moth is, that's the new name for gypsy moth, if you've heard of gypsy moth. So they are a defoliating critter. They work in about 10-year population cycles. We happen to be in a boom. Having the wet spring this year should help. We won't know for sure until probably June or July. But we are taking active management strategies around how do we manage these localized high populations. And so that's a joint effort, not only between forestry, but parks. They have trees. Engineering, as Sarah mentioned, they have trees as well. And so we've combined our forces both for surveying, for funding, for staffing, and for messaging too. So we've been trying to send all of our constituent relations and information through a web page that's a city spongy moth informational page with a bunch of links to like UW Extension, State DNR, and other industry experts to really try and help the residents get as much information as possible. In this case, we actually have one of our seasonal staff that's injecting an oak. We injected some Parks oaks, so large oaks that were not in the Kenosha Greenway area that we had sprayed. Those big mature oaks are the ones that we really want to save and protect. And so we did inject 135 oaks that were not in the spray area to make sure that they do have a level of protection from both spongy moth and two-line chestnut borer, which is a secondary pest that can parasitize and kill stress trees. Same family as EAB, and we actually use the same product. Okay, next, please. This slide, I'm not going to read it all, is basically laying out the seasonal schedule of what we did from a combined perspective from spongy moth. We identified the spongy moth outbreak last year, and engineering, forestry, and parks started working together. We've been having regular meetings between that team since last summer. And so what this kind of works through is the seasonal schedule of what did we do, when, and how did we message it. These are a bunch of different tools in the toolbox. There is not one thing that is going to take this sucker out. But what we're trying to do is really just try and help the trees that we have make it through this outbreak cycle. The trees that we care about are big. They've made it through this cycle before. We're just trying to help make sure that in the current climate, where we're navigating climate change, drought, I mean, ironically, I'm saying drought, but last summer, definitely drought stress was a part of it. Trying to help those big mature trees make it for the next cycle too. So there is not one thing that we use. It's a number of different things, as well as participation and partnership with the residents in the neighborhoods that this is an issue. Okay. I think that's the last one for me. Okay, thank you.
They mostly know who I am. Good afternoon, evening. It's evening at this point. Sorry. We're about halfway done. I'm kidding. Eric Knapp, Park Superintendent, here to talk a little bit about Madison Parks. We're not going to talk about everything we do, but we certainly have a core part of the green resilient part of things, trees. We think we have the most trees. We've never counted them all, and we probably never will. But if you could start with the next slide for me, please. This is our beautiful green city, and a lot of that is under our management, but as Sarah mentioned earlier, a lot of it's under engineering's management. Some of it's under collaborative management. Some of it we're not sure who owns, but we know the city does. And so we take care of it together. But the park system is great. If you didn't know, the parks owns about 13.9, 14% of the city. Collectively across large municipalities across the country, it's right about median point of green acreage. Next slide, please. This is just a little bit of touch. The color here doesn't come through quite as clear, but the system, though, does a lot of things. So we don't have a kind of a unitary purpose for our parks. We have a variety of purposes in all of our parks, but we have conservation parks, we have community parks, neighborhood parks, we have mini parks, we have special facilities. We have a cemetery. We actually have 3 cemeteries at this point because we keep annexing more of them, but only one is operational that we're responsible for. That's Forest Hill. But we have the golf course facilities as well. So all in, it's about 5,000 acres under our direct management. A lot of trees and a lot of green infrastructure, a lot of natural areas. Next slide, please. This is one we've recently, in the last decade, I guess I've been with parks back when Charlie started some of the work that really led to what we now call our ecology team. We've always had conservation parks. Think Cherokee Marsh, Owen Park, Edna Taylor, Olin Turble, right? Very highly intentional conservation and active land management to preserve those ecosystems. Historically, in the general park world, there was more like mowed turf, trees, and then stuff that got ignored, bluntly. But we've really tried to engage that ecological restoration, natural area management in all of our parks. And with that, across the general and conservation park categories, we're now a little bit more under managed natural area than we are under mowed turf. This doesn't include golf cemeteries or other special facilities, but within those big buckets, if you've, if you ever wondered, do we mow more land or do we actively maintain natural prairies and woodlots? It's the latter of those two. Next slide, please. So some work plan. I'm just going to try to tie the topic tonight to some of our work plan highlights. We got a big 10 things we're really focused on. And I think I can tie these together in a logical way to touch. So advanceable, sustainable, and resilient land management, obviously pretty relevant to what we're talking about. But stepping from that, we go from the land itself to also then the people and how people use that land, how people engage with that land, right? In golf, you might bristle at what the heck we're going to talk about golf tonight, but we'll get to it. But golf is actually a real part of land management, and we can change the way we've thought about it for a long time and do a lot more in a green, resilient way. Building a division-wide volunteer program. This is also really impactful and important. We talk about general fund costs. I've got a good way to get a lot of land management done. Just we need to coordinate those volunteers. They're passionate, dedicated. There are thousands of them in the city. All of them are smarter than me. And that's awesome, because that's also a low bar. But and the last one, expanding efforts to support nature everywhere, which is really focused on kids, but it's for everyone, nearby nature and accessible. One of the facts you should also know is for a city our size and density level, we're really phenomenal on access to parks. 95%, I think next year's calculation will be 96% of our residents are within a 10-minute walk of a public park. That is phenomenal for a city of our density. You know, San Francisco's at 100%. I saw Phil last week at the Nature Everywhere conference. He brags about it all the time, but I mean, he's got 800,000 people in a city half our size. It's a little easier to build that in. But we should be really proud of it. We're at the top end of a medium density city. Next slide, please. So sustainable and resilient land management. We're continuing the ecology team and in conservation, expanding the natural areas that we're actually actively managing throughout the entire park system using a variety of integrated methods to maintain them. Everybody loves the goats. People ask if we could just get more goats. We have a limit. There's an upper limit on goats availability. And there's also an upper limit on goat selectivity. So, right, they have a really good role in early stage land management. In later stage land management, if you didn't know, like they eat coneflowers too. They don't care. Like, so if you have good stuff, they're just gonna eat it all. So we really send them in to do the dirty work to start it off. Then eventually we end up using prescribed burns across the system. Engineering, Sarah's done a heck of a job collaborating with us, with contractors, just taking an all hands on deck. How do we get the most burning done? This is super impactful for the seed bank and the ecosystem to kind of regenerate. I won't talk a ton about how many trees we plant every year because it varies, but 250 to 300. But we do a lot of other things, like we buy trees, we buy woodlots. On the north side, a couple years ago, we bought 1,000 trees, right, of maturity. That's pretty cool. But we also do things like let oaks naturally regenerate. If you go to Olin Park, none of those oaks, those baby oaks, we didn't plant any of them. Right? What we did is got the bad stuff out of the way, the buckthorn, the honeysuckle, all those evil things you hear us talk about. Why we do that? You get them out of the way, those oaks that Ian talked about will naturally regenerate. And those oaks that are regenerating, the genetic material they come from has obviously been very successful in that location for a very long time. And even in the age of climate change, we think the most resilient oak we can plant is the oak that came from where it's at. So that's pretty cool. We also continue to convert to EV equipment. We have quite a few electric vehicles. We're 80-ish% of the things we do, we now have an electric component of hand tool that we use it for. There's some of the big, even including chainsaws, we use some, but there's still gas powered out there because of some of the power and cost. We continue to work to maximize that work. And we plant trees. Oh, I forgot to highlight the mayor. There is the mayor planting the beautiful trees out in front of our building and a prairie. But next slide, please, and we'll kind of try to go a little quicker here. So advance the golf program transformation. What I said earlier is golf you might not think of as a natural area thing, but if you go to all of our courses, Odana, there's a beautiful pollinator garden. Shout out to Marcel next to the volunteer, next to the parking lot. Best milkweed patch in the city. Go check out the butterflies. It's pretty amazing. But the Glen, we increased our natural areas in a little 36-acre golf park by 1,700%, right? So we can do these kind of things and not have just the mowed turf everywhere approach, which is awesome. And I think it really highlights the Oak Savannah there, and I'm really hopeful to see those baby oaks regenerate at the Glen as well. Next slide, please. So we want to really focus, and we are continuing to focus on building that volunteer program. I talked about one of the whys that you might be interested, which is cost savings, but another one is connection. Connection to each other, connection to land, connection to the city, connection to civic pride. I've never met people more passionate than the people who give their time to Obert Gardens, Warner Park Rec Center, all kinds of things, Owen Park, right? We have friends everywhere who care a lot, and we really want to put a focal point on that. And so we're working on some software that's citywide, actually shared with other agencies, Senior Center, Library, and others. Should be really impactful, I believe. Here you see some volunteers on the right side that you did pay to be there. Those are firefighter trainees. But we took it as free labor, and it was great. So next slide, please. And I think last slide, please. Yes, expanding support of nature everywhere. So what this is, I just want to make sure you're highlighted about, there's a conference hosted at Mona Terrace. They did a phenomenal job hosting it last week. I know some of you attended, and thank you for doing that. The mayor gave an excellent initial speech that really rallied people to get people connected to nature, right? Everyone has that right to have that opportunity, even in an urban setting. And I think we do that pretty well in our city. We can do better. this is not like a new program for the Parks Division. I want to be clear. We're not we don't have a coordinator or anything like that. What we're doing is trying to coordinate. Tanya Zastrow, our Obergarten's director, is working with a collaborative group from public health, multiple city agencies, and a lot of nonprofits, really trying to expand access, make sure we're connecting kids to programs, connecting the schools to like Leopold Nature Center and another, like some innovative programs there. That's the kind of stuff we're focused on. And I want you all to know about that because I think it is the most important thing we can do to protect our parks, I think 100 years from now, is make sure our kids care about them. But anyway, I think that's all I have. I don't have any more slides, do I? I didn't make the slides. I do not.